But if I'm to zoom in a little bit more then on this sort of purpose-driven element of it, you mentioned ADHD, you mentioned anxiety. That's pretty tough at balancing those two things, because ADHD requires oftentimes stimulation, right? And stimulation can cause anxiety. So there's a fascinating dynamic there, which of course coffee would have created a bit of trouble with, and that matcha for many people, even myself included, is a remedy for. What was that like for you then, going through? So you've spent quite a bit of time at university. You've been in white collar employment. You haven't shied away from, say, mentally intensive applications, right? In your adult life. That journey for you, this ADHD and saying anxiety as well, journey for you. When did that kind of when did discussions start being had around this possibility of ADHD being a factor for you, and how did you navigate that going through and into university and those sorts of things?
Sure. It's so funny. The first thing that pops into my mind, because you say you haven't shied away from, these very mentally kind of rigorous career paths, academic paths. And I'm thinking to myself, yeah, that's why my anxiety has been through the roof for the last 8 years. No joke. No joke, but we persevere, we get through it. I would say my symptoms probably started to reveal themselves at a very young age, and I have kind of an untraditional experience with psychiatry, psychology, whatever you want to call it. Both, and I'm very open about it, both of my parents have severe mental illness, and my mom is bipolar. My dad has several personality disorders, and there's a lot to unpack there. But my family basically thought it would be helpful that I start seeing a psychiatrist from quite a young age, and so I was under the kind of care and surveillance of a doctor from the age of 12. And so who I would see about anywhere from 2 to 4 times a month. So very frequently. And my teachers, I remember they would always say in class, you're always talking to your friends. You are constantly, you never, if you're called on at random, you have no idea what's going on in the class. But weirdly enough, I would always get through. I would still perform pretty well. I would cram at the last minute to study for exams. I really traditionally just couldn't focus, but I had other symptoms as well. Like my motivation would really fluctuate. I had no understanding of time management. I would be late to school every day. And that was really difficult because I didn't really have attentive parents. And so I was kind of responsible for myself from such a young age. And I would just show up to school very late. And so eventually my psychiatrist determined that I had ADHD. She could tell for quite a while, but she felt that it eventually needed some sort of medical intervention. And she recommended I start taking medication, which I did. And I continue to this day when I need to. But obviously matcha helps, of course, as it has with you. And I think that there is a massive stigma around the medication piece, but I can kind of come back to that because it's unfortunate for the ADHD community, but it is what it is. Anyways, I think I have always been quite ambitious, which has been really in conflict with my ADHD and my anxiety, because on the one hand I'm this it's but I also think that it has been somewhat of fuel for me. I think my desire to prove that I am not what I come from, which quite honestly is what motivates me, overpowers any sort of mental turbulence that I experience with my ADHD and anxiety at the end of the day. And so it is a battle, but eventually that motivation to perform, to achieve this success, however you might define it, that is what is the most powerful driver in my case. So that is how I've gotten through. But it hasn't, it's come at a cost for sure.
I guess what one comfort that I imagine that you must take is that you're certainly not alone in that, in so far as probably the most famous example of somebody in a very similar situation is Richard Branson, right? He's the famous sort of A-list sort of celebrity ADHD person, say, and a number of other things that he's worked with.